Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now, thanks to processors like these, the words integrated graphics aren't as off-putting as they used to be. In fact, buying an AMD APU is a fantastic way to get into PC gaming on a very tight budget. Thanks to its onboard Vega 11 graphics, the faster of the three options, the 3400G, could also be used as a sort of stopgap while waiting for the current discrete graphics card's stock situation to improve. You can make do with it for now, and then when that 3060 Ti or RX 5500 XT comes back into stock, you can just slip that into your system and continue where you left off with even better gaming performance. But what if you don't want an AMD APU? What if you want one of the fastest processors money can buy, like this for example, a 10-core, 20-thread i9-10900? Could you make do with its integrated graphics until stock of that graphics card you've been waiting for eventually trickles back onto online shelves? Well, today we're going to find out. So despite the i9's powerful processing credentials, it doesn't exactly shine in the GPU department, so how does it do? For lack of a better and more compatible option, gameplay was recorded through MSI Afterburner, which relies more on CPU power. The usage here is therefore slightly increased, but the frame rate and frame times remain unaffected. After all, we've got plenty of CPU power to spare. But first, the bad news. Cyberpunk 2077 at 70% resolution scaling runs with less than 10 FPS. Before we progress, this video isn't about pointing out whether or not the Intel UHD graphics are good or bad with the i9. After all, I'm sure most people who buy one of these are going to pair it with a discrete GPU. The aim here is just to determine whether or not you could use these integrated graphics until that graphics card you want comes back into stock. In the case of Cyberpunk, no, you probably couldn't. The base resolution was 1080p throughout, and I've just played around with the resolution scaling options of each game instead of dropping the native output, mostly for the sake of HUD and overlay quality. Rockstar's epic open world western Red Dead Redemption 2 also takes a bit of a hit. I actually tested this with my Pentium G6400 beforehand, which uses UHD 610 graphics, and we were seeing only 5 or so frames less here, which I thought was worth pointing out. When it comes to processing power, the difference is night and day, but when it comes to IGPU performance, even the modern dual-core can hold its own in comparison. The G6400, by the way, is a fantastic entry-level CPU, and it's also Intel's first or second ever 4GHz Pentium. It's excellent for the £50 or so that it costs, but I'm getting distracted. On to the better news now, or less bad news anyway. Recently, I've really been getting back into Obsidian's The Outer Worlds, and luckily I was able to continue my playthrough with the Intel UHD 630 graphics. Once again, we are utilising resolution scaling, this time at 50%. It doesn't look too bad, even with the low preset, but I think it's the game's unique art style that masks any visual flaws. Playing on a bigger screen is definitely going to wreak havoc with your eyeballs, I would assume, but yeah, the visuals in pairing with the mostly sub 30 FPS makes this one a bit hit and miss. It won't be playable for everyone, but it might be playable for some, put it that way. Grand Theft Auto 5 will run fine. I targeted 30 FPS throughout today's tests, and it was a more realistic expectation, I think. GTA averaged 36. We could have run tests at 720p for improved frame rates, but I think 1080p is the most common resolution, so I thought why not stick there today. And after we were done messing around with the scaling in a lot of games, we weren't far off 1280 by 720 anyway in some instances. Now the 1.1% lows here were very good too. GTA 5 is older than the other titles we've tested so far, and it's better suited to integrated graphics, but even so, despite its age, I think it still holds up okay visually, even with the normal, basically the game's low preset enabled. The city will impact performance more than the countryside, so this is more of a worst case scenario type thing here, but either way, maintaining at least 30 FPS most of the time isn't too much to ask of the UHD 630 solution. Battlefield 5 will also be playable-ish at low settings with 50% scaling. Multiplayer performance will vary, and different campaign missions will also produce very different results as well. My guess is that anyone who is buying an i9 for gaming isn't someone who would usually call less than 30 FPS playable though, so while I might see this as an okay result, you might find yourself wishing for that dream RTX card of yours to come back into stock even sooner. You know me though, if it hits 30 FPS then it's fine. Not a shared philosophy, I know, but there we go. Now a while ago, Fortnite may have just managed to hit 30 or 40 FPS at 1080p with Intel UHD graphics, but thanks to the new performance mode, it will do way better. Performance mode basically turns everything way down, beyond low, for the sake of extracting as much FPS from the title as possible. Now it won't look fantastic, that's for sure, but it does mean that you'll see a near 60 FPS average with nothing but the CPU in your system, and all the other vital components, of course. Busier areas once again will still cause noticeable drops, but that's a given at this point. But I mean, there we go. Can you use your i9 CPU to game without a graphics card until that GTX, RTX or RX card you've been waiting for comes back into stock? Well, it depends, but it's certainly worth a try. The thing is, I don't think you're going to see too much of a performance difference even with an i5 10400 or i7 10700. Because the bottleneck here is clearly the UHD 630 graphics. Now I mentioned earlier the UHD 610 graphics of my Pentium G6400, and while that did perform worse than the UHD 630 graphics seen here, well, the performance wasn't that far off in some instances, so from what I can tell, yeah, Intel HD graphics even in 2020 and with the most powerful CPU attached to that graphics processing unit still isn't going to be enough for playing modern and demanding games. Unless you really want to sacrifice resolution, maybe you could drop things down to 480p somehow, I don't know, but yeah, for the most part at 1080p, it's going to be very hit and miss. GTA and Fortnite are two games that will run and will be okay, to be honest, but as I said before, if you're the sort of person who's buying an i9, 30 FPS or just under probably won't be satisfactory, but it might tide you over until that dream card of yours comes back into stock, so it's worth giving any game you want to play a go, just to see what you think. But with all that said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like on it down below, leave a dislike if you didn't, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.